Hello, welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Sarah Gonzalez-Bosinski, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar hosted by the Economic Security for Survivors Project at the Institute for Women's Policy Research. Today, we are joined by experts from Family Values at Work and A Better Balance. We'll discuss in what states, counties, and cities protections are available for safe and sick leave protections for survivors and what gaps still remain. We're also hoping to discuss how programs can best educate staff and clients about these available protections to help increase utilization and promote safety of survivors. Before we get started, I do want to do some housekeeping so you can get familiar with our service provider. Your lines have been muted for the duration of the call. You can see at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen there's a blue chat icon and a hand icon. If you're having technical issues, please feel free to reach out to us directly by clicking on the hand icon, and one of our administrators will reach out to you to assist. If you're unable to see the screen, please call ReadyTalk support at 1-800-843-9166 and dial *0. Questions can be submitted to the presenters at any time by clicking on the chat icon. We'll actually be using the chat function a number of times today to engage you and ask for some feedback on questions we have, so please familiarize yourself with that, and we hope to hear from you and engage in some conversation. And finally, our webinar is being recorded, so at the end of this message we'll be able to share with other people and share the recording in our follow-up materials, which you should receive in approximately 1 week. So this webinar is hosted by the Institute for Women's Policy Research. IWPR works with policymakers, scholars, and public interest groups to design, execute, and disseminate research to illuminate the economic and social issues facing women and families, and to help build a network of individuals and organizations that conduct and use women-oriented policy research. And we do this in 5 different areas that contain our key programming. First, we have our Employment, Education, and Economic Change group. That includes activities such as employment and job quality, economic status of women in the states, pay equity and discrimination. You see a lot of our work recently out on that, and access to higher education and job training. We also do a lot of work around democracy and society, poverty, welfare, and income security, family and work, and finally health and safety, which is where our Economic Security for Survivors project is housed. The S Project is a national technical assistance project focused on elevating and institutionalizing best practices to help build, protect, and restore survivor economic security so that individuals who are experiencing intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and stalking may be safe from abuse and violence in the future. We've been around since 2010 and have conducted over 225 trainings and technical assistance activities, reaching more than 2,500 victim service, advocacy, and justice system professionals nationwide. In addition, we have partnered with a number of organizations across 17 states now to foster comprehensive community responses, help achieve greater use of economic relief and recovery, and enhance economic advocacy services within victim advocacy and support programs. Our work has also included engaging criminal justice partners to promote practices that reduce financial barriers to victim safety and enhance economic justice. Examples of this include better aligning legal practices and identifying resources to reduce the cost of participation, and promoting economic relief to ensure survivors' independence and recovery. We also help to develop and institutionalize curricula that victim advocates can use to support the economic empowerment and employment services for survivors. And finally, we have a range of policy and research briefs available on our website that can help look at some of these economic issues in more detail. Feel free to check out our website at www.iwpr.org for more information. And finally, I'd like to introduce our presenters. We are joined first by Marianne Bellasorte, who's the National Implementation Director with Family Values at Work. Marianne works with member organizations and national advocates around implementing and enforcing paid leave laws. She currently oversees a rapid experimentation implementation project based in Rhode Island, New Jersey, and California. Marianne is also Vice President of Advocacy with Pathways PA, where she heads the Coalition for Healthy Families and Workplaces. After vetoes in 2011 and 13, Marianne and the coalition won paid sick days for Philadelphia workers in 2015. She now collaborates with the City of Philadelphia on implementing the law. Thanks for joining us, Marianne. And we are also joined by Preston Van Vliet, who's the national campaign organizer of the LGBTQ Work Family Project, which is a joint initiative of a better balance and family values at work. Preston is engaged in coalition building across movements and helping to message how LGBTQ issues are included in family work issues. Before working with the LGBTQ Work Family Project, Preston was active in several campaigns and projects in Michigan. While the president of the LGBTQ student organization at Oakland University, he helped start a campaign to get a full-time staff person on campus gender and sexual center to help enumerate the anti-discrimination policy to be LGBTQ inclusive. He's worked with another number of different organizations to help make sure that the voices of LGBTQ individuals are heard and that they have equal access. So we're very thrilled to have Preston joining us as well today. And before we get into more of the content, we'd like to get a sense of who's with us on this call. So if you wouldn't mind just filling out the poll of what occupation your role most closely aligns with. And we can share those results with everyone. Give everyone another couple minutes. You see that we're joined by a lot of domestic and sexual violence program staff. Great to have you with us. And public policy advocates as well. And for those of you who are selecting other, please feel free to type what your occupation is in the chat box so we can welcome you as well. Okay, we still have some final numbers coming in. I mentioned most of us are coming from the domestic and sexual violence fields. So some of the content I'll be covering won't be too new to you all, but for the benefit of those who might not be immersed in domestic and sexual violence issues, we'll cover a little background information. So thank you to all for filling that out, and I'm going to jump into a little more background information. So when we think about employment and the intersection of violence, it can mean a lot of different things for survivors. For some, employment can be yet another aspect of their lives that abusers can manipulate, or it can be a safe haven offering survivors a pathway out of an abusive relationship to the financial resources they need to recover. So employment is very critical for us to be thinking about how we can help promote victims' safety and security, how we can keep them safe in their jobs so they do have this very important pathway. Now, in terms of employment as an aspect of abuse, both intimate partners and coworkers can threaten survivors' employment. Both have the ability to exercise power and control, either by threatening to or actively sabotaging employment. There was a 2005 survey conducted by the Maine Department of Labor, and this survey found that interference by abusive partners was incredibly common and often quite severe. Constant distraction and fear made it difficult for victims to concentrate and perform their work duties. They found specifically that 87% of survivors reported that their abusive partners called during the workday. In some cases, this was up to 100 calls per week. 78% said that their abusive partners continually showed up at work, and nearly half said they had experienced physical or emotional assault before starting the workday. The study also showed that abusers interfered with their partner's ability to get to work, such as keeping them up all night, promising to take children to daycare or school and then backing out at the last minute, or hiding the keys to the car, which of course contributes to missed work and absenteeism. These are always deliberate acts with the goal of creating dependency and depriving survivors of the resources they need to seek safety. And in this study in particular, it found that 60% of the survivors had to either quit their jobs or were fired as a result of abuse. Now, this isn't just unique to individuals in intimate partner relationships. If survivors are, their abuser is their coworker or their boss, they often have positions of power where they can, in fact, harm their ability to maintain employment. Imagine you're faced with your abuser or your rapist every day at work. It will undermine your ability to focus on your job and will erode your job performance. And often we see when survivors think about reporting, they're intimidated by the perpetrators who threaten to have the survivor fired. Sometimes we see survivors ultimately leaving their job or just trying to carry on and avoid the perpetrator. So these threats are pretty serious. Economic security is a vital pathway to safety and recovery, and without employment, survivors are often more vulnerable. Just wanted to share some statistics to show what this means in terms of time off that the research has shown. Survivors often need time off for a range of reasons, whether it's to address injuries, seek protective orders, participate in criminal and civil cases, receive assistance in counseling, just to cope with the stress, or help their children addressing some of their issues. This is a bit of an older analysis, so that's what we have at this point, unfortunately, but it's from the National Violence Against Women survey that was conducted in 1996, and it found that an estimated 7.9 million paid workdays were lost a year by victims of domestic violence. Survivors of IPV who experienced stalking were found to lose the most numbers of paid days per year. But of course, we know there's some overlap within each of these victimizations, and that this is just an average. Some survivors are facing much higher losses in terms of paid work. And so not only are they taking time off, they're losing potential income that can help provide for their future safety or help them meet their current expenses. So it can ultimately be very costly. And for survivors who don't have access to paid sick leave, they might actually be risking their job by having to take time off to deal with the consequences of violence. So we want to make sure that we're helping survivors have access to financial resources so they can help move forward and address their own needs. But when this is added to the high cost of experiencing violence, whether it's medical and mental health costs, legal fees, or debt that's been generated from an abusive partner, combined with the weaker safety net, it really makes it very difficult for survivors to move forward, and ultimately they end up becoming more dependent on the abuser. Economic insecurity compromises victim safety, so without these resources, they have little opportunity to break free from the cycle and rebuild their lives. And this is where we really see employment as an important protective factor. It can provide financial resources, include critical access to things like health insurance, and help promote economic independence and provide access to services and treatments. It plainly just gives survivors options. So this is particularly important when and helpful when workplaces are responsive to survivors' needs and are able to institutionalize practices and policies that promote their safety and security. And that brings us back to our topic today of helping survivors get access to available sick and safe leave protections so they're not jeopardizing their employment by seeking safety, help, or whatever resources they need. And now I'm going to turn it over to you all to get some insights from you. Just you can, again, look at the chat box in the lower left-hand corner. Tell us how your agency has been working with clients to help them maintain their jobs. And I know that you all won't be able to see any of the responses coming in, but we can go ahead and read them to you all. Or similarly to these questions, how are you working directly with clients to protect their jobs while seeking safety or other services that they need? I see one response is offering alternative schedules temporarily to promote stabilization. Right? Identifying coping skills, arranging transportation. Good. I'll take a couple others and then we can turn it over. Vocational training, rehab, education training. Great. Right, DV verifications letters, great. Granted short-term leave disability, working on potential legislation, great. To ensure that people can take time off to participate in the legal process as needed. Wonderful, and we'll be able to talk a little bit about that this afternoon. Providing gift cards for transportation, providing letters while in court, all great. Thank you all. And now I can turn it over to Preston, who's going to be talking a little bit more about these protections available, especially I see mention of the Illinois Victims Economic Security and Safety Act, which is a fantastic resource and example that we're always pointing to. So I'll let Preston talk a little bit more about the network of protections that are out there. Thanks, Preston.
Great. Yes, thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you everyone for hopping on with us. I'm really excited to be talking with you today to see so many awesome service providers on here. I was also a case manager for a permanent supportive housing program for several years, and so I love every opportunity I can get to talk with other service providers about ways that we can support survivors. So what I'm going to be doing today is a quick review of what the landscape is like across the country for survivors being able to access paid time off of work, and then I'm going to touch a little bit on unpaid time off of work as one of their options for navigating their domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking. So I want to do a quick overview about the differences between the types of workplace leave policies that you may be familiar with. So a lot of folks know FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act. This is a federal law that was passed in the 90s that provides up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave to bond with a new child, take care of a family member who is seriously ill, to recover from your own serious health condition. It also provides some opportunities to take time off to deal with care related to military deployment. There's a lot of gaps in this law. One, it doesn't have specific safe time provisions, so survivors can't explicitly use it to go to a shelter or to seek DVSA services. It's unpaid, so it's not economically viable for live survivors, and for other reasons in the law, it leaves out about 40% of the workforce anyways. And then there's paid leave, and there's no federal legislation that guarantees paid leave for these uses. So that's why states and municipalities have been passing laws to meet the needs of their workers in this way. And we typically talk about paid leave in two policy buckets. One is paid sick and safe days, which is what I'm primarily spending time on, and paid family medical leave. The differences between those two, paid sick and safe days, you want to think about it's a short amount of time. Workers have been able to typically accrue like 1 hour of paid time off for every 30 hours or 40 hours that they work. And this is, for you to go to your doctor, to, if you have a cold or the flu and you need a few days off, or you need to take care of someone else who's dealing with that. And a lot of these paid sick day laws include provisions for safe time, which is why I call them paid sick and safe days laws. So then compare that to paid family medical leave. This is what you typically associate with paid parental, but in the places in which have passed statewide paid family medical leave programs, it's also for family caregiving and oftentimes builds upon already existing temporary disability insurance programs. And I saw one of the participants reference that as a way that they supported their clients, so that's great. And so I did a little picture, help you think about the differences. Paid sick and safe days, short term, HIV testing, relocating to a shelter. You got a cold. Paid family medical leave, longer length of leave. You have a broken bone, you're bonding with a new foster child, or a lot of folks also use paid family medical leave to manage chronic illnesses, and such as I had put a little picture here of mental illness, mental health, and recurring serious health conditions that go with that. So where are there paid safe time laws? I want you all to be listening for your state, listening for your city. If you don't hear it and you're like, I want a law like this, come talk to me. I got some ideas. So there's a few things that are wrong on this map, unfortunately. There are 23 of the 39 enacted paid sick and safe day laws cover some amount of safe time. So a little error there, but that's my fault. And of the statewide laws that have been passed, and there are 7 in DC, all of them cover some amount of safe time. And I'll talk a little bit about what exactly that means in a second. So we got California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Oregon, Vermont, Washington, D.C., and the other one that didn't get shaded in here is the state of Arizona, which passed via ballot initiative last November. And I do want to give a shout out. DV coalitions have been a tremendously important part of just like the paid work leave movement historically. You know, being the first ones to fight for and pass legislation for like unpaid leave for survivors' rights and job protection for survivors in the workplace was very much influential in the work that advocates who are doing paid leave now are benefiting from. So I definitely want a big shout out to everybody and all the DV advocates who have been involved in past campaigns and in many of the current campaigns today that we are working on to try to pass paid sick and safe days, paid family medical leave. So I want to run through some of the municipal laws. So as I said, that previous slide was just highlighting the state laws. I'm going to talk about the municipal laws. California has a bunch. So it has a statewide law, and then it has 7 local ones. The California law, all workers that are covered under California law have at least 3 days of safe time that they can use to access DV services, go to a shelter, other things related to seeking safety. There are 4 cities within California that have built upon and strengthened those safe time protections. Those are Santa Monica, San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Something that's important to understand about the way that the California safe time laws are written is that with the exception of San Diego, an individual may only use safe time if they themselves are navigating that domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking. With San Diego, that a worker can use their safe time to support a loved one who is navigating domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And so here are the other municipal paid sick and safe day laws that are currently on the books. The 3 cities in the state of Washington that build upon the state law, a couple of laws in Minnesota, Chicago and Cook County, Philly, New Brunswick, New Jersey, and Montgomery County. So I just want to touch upon super briefly unpaid safe time. I saw Wendy Pollack is on there from the Shriver Center in Chicago, hey, and talking about VESA, which provides guaranteed time off, unpaid time off work, and a ton of other protections for survivors in the state of Illinois. And so I wanted to just point to, these are just some examples of some places that have laws that explicitly guarantee whether it's a number of days or a number of weeks off for survivors to be able to take time off of work to deal with what they're going through. There are other types of laws that I didn't list here, like that provide reasonable accommodations for survivors, and that could include unpaid time off, but doesn't explicitly guarantee it in law. But it could also account for things like flexible schedules, stuff like that. And also, a lot of the crime victims compensation laws do include some amount of job protection so that a survivor can take leave from work as it's related to their crime victims compensation application. So legal momentum is where I got a lot of that information about unpaid time off work for survivors, and I definitely recommend everyone checking that out. And just with the last couple of minutes here that I have for my section, I want to provide you with a couple of guiding questions that you're take back to your organization and look at your own local and state paid sick and safe day laws. First thing, and something that's always important for survivors, of course, is confidentiality. So nearly every paid sick and safe day law, as well as the national model that A Better Balance and our partner, the National Partnership with Women and Families, uses when working with campaigns, doesn't require documentation that must be given to an employer until the employee is out for 3 or more consecutive days. And of course, we strive to provide as much flexibility in what documentation is considered reasonable, including an option for survivors to be able to sort of self-certify that they need time related to DVSA. There are confidentiality provisions on documentations related to paid sick and safe time that an employer must abide by. I know it's not perfect, but these are things that you want to make sure that you understand about your local and statewide laws. Another important thing is to understand how family is defined within your law. Oftentimes with these combined paid sick and safe days laws, the definition of family for the sick part for health and caregiving can be different than for who you are allowed to use your safe leave to help take care of. And the reason for this differing family definition within the same law is, many of the paid sick and safe day laws sort of cross-cite or use already existing definitions of family and domestic violence, and those things made that complicated. And we can talk more about that if you have questions. And of course, this has implications for who survivors can reach out to ask to help them, help them pack up their stuff, help them, drive them to a shelter, help them be with them in court, and those are just things you want to be mindful of. And then the last thing I want to say is not all of the safe time provisions covers all the different ways in which survivors are surviving. So typical uses are you can take time off to go to a court appointment, to get a BPO, to go to a shelter, to go seek services. But we know for a lot of reasons that those things aren't accessible to everybody. If you think about different marginalized communities, LGBTQ folks who may not feel safe in mainstream shelters, and there's not a lot of other options available for them, people who can't or don't want to interact with the criminal justice system, those things are not available to them. There are some laws that have really inclusive catch-alls that sort of let folks survive the way that they need to survive, but not all of them necessarily do. So I want you to be able to keep an eye out for that as you're understanding your own local laws. A Better Balance has a really great fact sheet, and we'll be sending these materials out with the presentation after this webinar. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to my coworker, Mary Ann.
Thank you, Preston, and thank you, everyone. I'm also very excited to be here and glad to be able to discuss these issues with all of you. As mentioned earlier on the call, I am with Family Values at Work as the National Implementation Director. I am also with Pathways PA, which is an organization located in the Philadelphia area. We work to end the cycle of poverty, homelessness, and abuse for women and families, and I am the Vice President of Advocacy there. So I wanted to start out just by talking a little bit about why and how to invest in education around paid sick and safe days. The why, I think, is pretty clear, especially for those of you who are working with clients. You want to support your clients. You want to support survivors in general. And wherever there are paid sick and safe days, those are great tools for people to be able to hold on to their jobs and hold on to the economic security that they need in order to get out of the situation that they are in and really move into safety and stability. The how can get a little bit more complicated. What we have learned is that it is a little bit more than just giving someone a piece of paper that says, hey, you have paid safe days, you can use them. Clients really do need to know more about the law and especially want to see people who have benefited from the law and know that these people have not lost their jobs for using safe days. And so newer clients who are coming in may feel more comfortable knowing that they also will not lose their job by using the time. We also want to show who is and is not, or who does and does not have access to paid sick days right now. So you'll see on this slide looking at access by sex and by race and ethnicity. Right now, only about 60% of workers over the age of 18 have access to paid sick days in their job. That means that 2/5 of employees nationwide have to limit their illnesses to nights and weekends. I don't know about you all. The last time I got sick, I wasn't really able to say, hey, hold off until Saturday. The flu came when the flu wanted to come. You'll also notice with these numbers that we're not necessarily talking about people who can use the sick time for their family members or who can use it without facing retaliation. And those are also things to consider and things that drive access down. So if I can take time for myself but I can't take time for my child, it makes it that much harder, of course, when my child is sick. If the workplace says, yes, you can take time, but you get absentee points for using that time, and if you get so many points, you run the risk of getting fired, that also makes it harder to take the time off. And that's why the laws that have passed around the country that Preston was talking about are so important, because they make sure that everyone has access to time for sick and hopefully safe days and remove any type of retaliation for taking that time. If we drill down into these numbers just a little bit more, you'll see within the population groups that there are differences by race and gender. Hispanic and Black men are less likely to have access to paid sick days than their female counterparts. White women are slightly less likely to have access to paid sick days than white men. If you look strictly at race, you'll see that Hispanic workers are far less likely to have paid sick days than the average employee. Less than half of Hispanic workers are getting paid sick days in their jobs right now. American Indian and Alaskan Native workers also have lower than average access to paid sick days. So these numbers are all important. For those of you who are working in a city or state that does not have paid sick and safe time yet, just to have a sense of who is and is not likely to have the time, and also to be able to share this information with people who maybe can change that, who can, whether you yourself are legislatively active or able to work with legislators or other organizations in order to say how important this is. For those of you where these laws have passed, this might help you identify people who are not used to having paid sick days or any kind of safe time, and letting them know that, yes, you get this too. Similarly, you will see that access varies based on immigration status. We've been talking a lot about immigration status lately in the news, and I know that this is something that many of you are already very engaged with. As you can see by this chart, immigrant men and women are less likely to have access to paid sick days than U.S.-born workers. We know that for workers who are in any kind of situation, whether they're being denied sick days or safe days, they're of course fearful of losing their job. For immigrant workers, there's always the worry about being reported to ICE. We also know, while we can't make generalizations, that if an employer does decide to threaten to call ICE or actually make a call, that is almost always considered some kind of adverse employment action. So that may be something that will actually stand in a worker's favor if an immigrant worker decides to try to use sick time or safe time and is kept from doing so. These are things that we can really get into more detail about, and I encourage you, if you have run into this situation before, or if you work with a large immigrant or undocumented population, please do ask questions about it or reach out to me after the call. We're trying to do some research on this, and I'd love to talk to you more and to connect you with some people who will know even more about this. I will say that in your position as an organization working with survivors, if someone comes to you in need of safe days but is not given that time, if you live in a city or state that automatically provides access, you may be able to file a complaint as an organization with your city or state agency rather than putting the worker at risk. That's something we're certainly happy to talk to you about more. The other demographic that we want to touch on here is sexual orientation. As you can see on this chart, when it comes to sexual orientation, access to paid sick days remains the same for gay or bisexual men as it does for heterosexual men and women. However, lesbian and bisexual women have only 55% of them have access to paid sick and safe days, compared to 60% of the general population. You'll notice here too that this question does not ask about transgender people. As far as we know, the data doesn't exist. That's certainly something that we are hoping to learn more about and to be able to share in future research.
And Marianne, one thing I want to say about that too, particularly around disparities for LGBTQ survivors, the bi women, like bisexual women and bisexual men, for having lower access rates to paid sick and safe days are actually facing much, much higher rates of domestic violence and sexual assault in their lifetimes as well.
Yeah, thank you for including that, Preston, because that is definitely true and really important to share. So we have here a chat box question for those of you who are online, and you can go ahead and type in your answer. If you are currently doing education about sick and safe leave laws in your state, your county, your city, how are you sharing this information? This is something that I'm really engaged with within my work at Family Values at Work. I know Preston is very engaged with it too. We're always looking for new ways to talk to people about the law. We have a question here, who do we contact to learn more about the law in Illinois? In Illinois, that would be Women Employed, and we'd be more than happy to put you in touch after the call. Is there anyone on the call who is doing education about these laws right now, or has any thoughts on some good ways to do that? I'll give it another minute. If not, we do have some suggestions on the next slide for you. Great, and in Illinois, people can also talk to Wendy Pollack at the Shriver Center. All right, so let's take a look at some things that are already out there that you might be able to use to educate people around around sick and safe days within your existing programming. One of the first things to do is to use survivors' toolkits. I'm sure many of you have something like this, some packet of materials that you give out to people when they first come into your program. It's important to remember that, of course, that just including things in your packet might not be enough. Whenever possible, it's great to have staff or partners or volunteers walk through these materials and, again, talk about people who have used the safe time and who have benefited from it. But within the Survivors Toolkits, you can certainly include information. It's great to make sure that items are easy to read and to copy, and to make sure that they're at a reading level that most people can understand. When you're doing outreach to partners, this is great material to share with advocates, social workers, law enforcement, lawyers, judges. Anyone who is working with survivors should know about these laws and should know how to talk to others about the laws. You could certainly include this in any kind of licensing or continuing education if you have that ability. Working with police academies and police officers to offer training would be great. Even trying to get this on legal clinic websites for people who are appearing pro se would be helpful. And then you see a list of a few different planning and workshops that your organization may be offering. I was at a conference last year where the San Francisco Domestic Violence Consortium said that they had added a question to their intake screening asking if domestic violence was impacting work life. And what they found was that survivors were much more willing to answer that question and to almost use that as an opening to talk about violence in their lives in general, because it was a lot easier just to talk about it from a work perspective. So the consortium actually began offering employment clinics and other types of workers' rights clinics, which got people more engaged and more willing to come in and was almost a gateway to their services. So that's something that I would suggest to you as well. The other important thing to know is that you should try to reach people when they most need the resources. Even if you are talking about paid leave laws at intake, please remember to talk to people about it again when they need it most, so when they're receiving medical care, when they are getting ready to talk to the police or to law enforcement, when they're dealing with court hearings, when they have to move, anything that your safe time law covers. Please train your staff to talk to clients about it. And especially if you have any former clients who work directly with new survivors that are coming in or who speak on behalf of your organization, having them talk about safe days that they've used and how it impacted their lives would be really helpful. It is so great for people to see that representation and, again, just to know that they will not be fired for using this time. So we have one more question here. What barriers are preventing survivors from accessing paid safe days? I'm curious to hear in the chat box if you all have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, Marianne mentioned the possibility of fear or lack of knowledge. It'd be helpful to get a sense of where you think survivors are. Discouragement, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a little more information on what particularly is discouraging about it? Is it trying to work with the employer?
I see while we're waiting for that, concerns about confidentiality too, and that's certainly something that we have talked about, and I think for anyone who works directly with employers, it would be great to do some training on confidentiality there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the employer not wanting to get involved or cooperating. And the response is, of course, very possible that the survivor would be hesitant to take time off for fear their coworkers will question their absence. Newly employed may not have accrued enough days yet for access issues, fear of termination, negative action. So maybe Marianne and Preston, do you have any suggestions on ways to address those concerns?
So all of this will depend on the law that is covering a certain city or state. In many cases, you don't need to say why you were taking the time until you've been out for several consecutive days. So for people who may only need a few hours to go to a legal clinic, to go to court, even if you're only taking 1 or 2 days at a time, you may not even have to say to your employer, this is why I'm out. The only times you really need to do that is if you have to provide some sort of doctor's note. And in those cases, it does get a little bit trickier to figure out how to provide that without the employer knowing, hey, this isn't from a doctor, this is from a judge, this is from an organization. And that is where some of the non-discrimination comes in, and just some other needs to do outreach to employers to help them understand what they should be doing to support their staff.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think, the stigma that survivors are experiencing and being very fearful, especially if, an abuser is a coworker, is very real. And I would recommend, have an employee when they're asking, recommending or asking for time off, that they say, I need to use my paid sick and safe days, and, don't necessarily have them say which one, but just say both. I need to use my paid sick and safe days, right? And then you have usually, up to 2 to 3 days before having to produce documentation for it. There's there's a nervousness, I think, around an employee saying, I'm using my paid sick day, and then it later is documented that that person was using safe leave. There are choices that you make as service providers in coaching your clients for what is best for them and what makes them most comfortable to do. But I would caution against that. I would advise them to ask for, I need to use my paid sick and safe days, or I need to use half a day of my paid sick and safe days, something like that.
So are there other larger efforts going on to help educate employers? Because that seems to be one of the big issues here, is how do we better engage them? Are there organizations who primarily do that?
So there are a few organizations that work directly to find employers that are more supportive of paid sick days laws, of higher minimum wage laws, of things like that. I'm blanking right this second on a national organization that works specifically with employers on this issue, although I'm sure there may be some. And Preston, maybe you are able to think of one when I am not.
It's possible, but maybe Futures Without Violence might do some business-related outreach, but I don't have specific programs in mind.
Yeah,
I think
the two that I'm – oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for anyone who is working with the business community and what they do, we'd be really happy to work with you on how to do some of that education as well.
Yeah, like Preston was saying, I imagine Futures Without Violence and their Workplaces Respond do some work around this because it's very much a safety issue in the workplace, but also possibly the Corporate Alliance to End Partner Violence. They do a lot of work to promote domestic and sexual violence policies in the workplace. I'm not sure if they do anything specific around paid sick and safe leave, but that's another opportunity to make sure at least the larger employers are doing good on this issue. Some of the challenges may very well be with smaller employers who may not qualify. I'm trying to see if we missed any other questions that have come in or comments. A question about enforcement and how much power can a worker have if to do it on the victim's behalf. So looking at maybe how an organization can reach out, as you were mentioning earlier, Marianne.
Right. So an organization's ability is somewhat defined by, again, the city or state that they are working in. Some cities and states with paid safe days laws will allow for third-party complaints, where an organization or an individual can just go and say, look, this person is working at Jean's coffee shop, and I know that they were fired because they had to take time off under paid sick and safe days, and instead they were fired. Even if you do not work in that type of environment, even if the law that's been passed there doesn't allow for a third-party complaint, I think that the organizations who are in this call should still reach out to their local agency and say, what can I do? Even before you get a complaint about this, even before you have to work with a client on it, just having that conversation now, helping the agency to see why maybe a client would not want to say, hi, it's me who's doing this, but would want this to be more at a third-party level, and see just what you can do with the agency. We have a network of 25 member states, so we have organizations in 25 states across the country that might be able to help you do this. I'd also be happy as well to help try to connect you to the agencies and see what we can do on a case-by-case basis in your own state. But I think that there are certainly ways where you have power and standing to take action for a worker.
Thanks. I don't think we missed any other questions. Maybe we can go on. We have another question for the group as well. For, I guess, those of you who have paid sick and safe laws, or maybe those who don't, maybe who have unpaid, how can those who are working on these campaigns and efforts improve these so they can have better access for survivors? Any thoughts particularly around some of those documentation issues that might be problematic, confidentiality? Now's a good time to share ideas. Preston and Marianne, I'm not sure if you've seen any, some practices that are more effective than others that you could share, or things to think about in states, or how those in states with unpaid sick and safe days can think about moving towards getting paid sick and safe days. As we know, Preston, you mentioned it's great to have unpaid and job-protected leave, but it still might not be a viable option for survivors if they're economically secure, so how they can maybe look for improving those laws.
Well, I'll say a couple of suggestions, and I had raised the family definition piece earlier. I'd really love for there to be opportunities so that workers who they individually themselves may not be navigating violence, but are called upon by a loved one to help them. I would really love Safe Time to be extended to those loved ones who are part of a survivors network. Especially, I know for me, a personal story. I had a good friend, another trans person who I hadn't talked to in about 2 years. They kind of like disappeared from my life. I didn't really know what was going on with them. Out of nowhere, they called me and was just like, "Hey, I just left my abuser's house. It was a rough relationship, and can you go pick up my stuff before he destroys it?" And I was like, "I sure can. Okay, let's go do this." And luckily, I had just gotten off of work. Otherwise, I would have had to ask my boss if I could have, taken 3 hours off of work to go support this person who I would consider part of my chosen family, even though we were sort of separated for a while. So I think that's one piece that's really important. I do think that there are a lot of ways in which we should think about the eligible or the different ways that survivors are surviving that we should make sure are being captured by these laws. As I said, that are sort of outside the realm of interacting with the criminal justice system or mainstream DVSA services, and think that there could be a lot of learning to be done there to make sure these laws are written inclusively. And then I do think that there are opportunities within both statewide unpaid FMLAs. And I know a participant had referenced, trying to get the paid family medical leave law in their state to include Safe Time. I think those are the two big ways that I would think could provide a lot of support for survivors.
And similarly, I noticed that some of the, especially very small city level laws have very narrow definitions of who is eligible for SAFE, specifically looking just at domestic violence versus domestic violence and sexual assault and stalking. So more opportunities to help make sure there's, that these policies are inclusive of all survivors. Very important. And then I'm seeing a question about what legislation should national groups be advocating for at the national level for paid sick and safe days? And I'll let either Preston or Mary Ann answer that.
So the best piece of legislation at the national level is the Healthy Families Act. It's been introduced over a number of years, but it is still out there and still a piece of legislation that we support really strongly. It would allow workers to earn time to care for themselves and their family members. It's a good reminder to, look back into it to, at some of those specific Safe Time provisions though, to make sure that those are as inclusive as possible. And maybe there could be additional opportunity there for the federal bill to create a nationwide paid family medical leave program. Again, that longer lengths of leave. There could potentially be opportunities there that I think are worth exploring as well. And of course, I definitely believe that workplace leave advocates should be really involved with any future VAWA reauthorizations. And I think actually a lot of the work that Mary Ann does with working on implementation and making sure there are resources to do outreach, worker education, employer education, there could possibly be legislative opportunities to increase resources for that type of
implementation work as well.
And I would add to that too, you may find in some places that have already passed laws that they don't necessarily want to go back into the legislative process, but there may be ways to make changes administratively with the agency that would not require new legislation. So there are always ways to make amendments and to add in different pieces if you feel like it's needed. And I would definitely encourage you to work with your local agencies and to work with your local coalitions to make that happen.
Great. And I've also included a couple of resources from our presenters today on this page. I see there's another comment here about not underestimating the value of giving notices at the workplace and notices given to new employees annually during trainings. That's one of the great ways that employees learn about their rights. Are there any general questions? We have just a couple minutes left that people may have for Preston or Marianne. And if any of you want more information about how to get involved in campaigns, I encourage you to check out their websites and see what's happening in your jurisdiction if you don't currently have any paid sick leave protections. It's a great way to learn what's going on and get involved and make sure the voices of survivors are heard as well. I'll give another minute for questions. In the meantime, I'll put up contact information for everyone so you can reach out to them directly. Any final thoughts from our presenters while people might be typing up questions?
I would just like to say I'm really excited to hear your feedback, and especially as you're learning more about these laws, if they're new to you, to hear what would be helpful for you to tell your clients about them, to tell the people that you work with. If there are any tools or materials that we can provide, I would really love to be able to do that.
And just to sort of echo what Sarah was prompting earlier, having your feedback as service providers of the ways in which laws and policies are not capturing the needs of your clients is always tremendously helpful. You're seeing the impacts of these laws on folks every day, folks who are in crisis, and so any ideas or feedback or observations that you have for what we could be doing better as policy advocates, that would be great.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we want these to be beyond theoretically available to survivors. We want them to actually be real and meaningful and not something they're too worried about taking advantage of because they're so critical to their safety. Well, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions coming in. I know we had a few that we were answering during the presentation. I want to thank you all for joining us and give a big thanks to our presenters today for sharing that information. And I really hope that you check out their websites to learn more and see how we can partner together to make sure that these policies are really, truly meaningful for survivors and protect everyone. So thank you all for your time. As I mentioned, we'll be sharing resources in about a week, including a recording of the webinar, contact information, and additional fact sheets that you might find helpful. So thank you for everyone for joining us today.